Citizens joining us at the Grenada Boys Secondary School auditorium for the rainwater harvesting consultation. We want to welcome you to this afternoon's event. I would also want to welcome in our midst those that are joining us online via TNR Communications and the GCruise 473 various social media and YouTube platform. Thank you all for bearing with us, and thank you for joining us for this afternoon's fruitful discussion. We hope to hear from you, both those in the auditorium with us this afternoon as well as those joining us online. We're talking about rainwater harvesting. And just before we start off today's proceedings, I would ask us to stand as we invoke God's presence, please. Let's bow our heads. Heavenly Father, we thank you for bringing all of us here this afternoon to have a fruitful discussion on the rainwater harvesting regulations. We ask that today's event be one that will open our minds of our citizens, as well as we will be able to receive fruitful feedback, responses, comments, and all their questions be answered today. Rainwater harvesting is a very important initiative that we all as citizens have to undertake, and we pray that today's proceedings go as fruitful as possible, and when we are leaving, you bring all of us home safely. We ask all these mercies and many more through Christ we pray. Amen. Thank you. You may have your seats. The Climate Resilient Water Sector in Grenada, GCruise project for short, has been undergoing several areas when it comes to developing or enhancing Grenada's water sector. The project started off in 2020 and we are just about rounding up. It will officially end in June 2026. We have been doing several initiatives across, working along with various sectors, Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Health, our Ministry of Infrastructure. I know one of the tangible things that many persons have been seeing would be the water storage tanks, the big blue water storage tanks. And for persons within the St. George area, you might notice that very big blue tank at Guankai, that is in Montrouge. That is one of the tangible assets underneath the GCruise project. We have been working along with the Ministry of Agriculture, assisting farmers with the Challenge Fund, ensuring that they have micro and drip irrigation sprinklers. We've been working along with the Ministry of Tourism and several other partners, as well as NOASA and other government organizations and non-government organizations. But this afternoon, we're here to speak about the rainwater harvesting regulations. This is about our third to fourth series of consultations. Earlier this week, we were in Carriacou and Petit Martinique speaking to our sisters across there. And today, we are here in Grenada to speak to us, our local citizens here, about rainwater harvesting. Now, the purpose of the regulation is simply to guide the safe collection, storage, and use of rainwater while strengthening Grenada's ability to cope with water scarcity and climate shocks. Rainwater harvesting is merely designed to supplement existing water systems. So we're not here to tell you you have to replace any water systems. It will just supplement your existing water systems. Now you might ask, why rainwater harvesting legislation now? Grenada faces prolonged dry spells. We have increasing climate variability. We have a growing demand for water from development, and we have greater pressure on the national water infrastructure. Rainwater harvesting, as we know, is nothing new because our sisters and brothers on the sister isle of Carriacou and Petit Martinique has been doing rainwater harvesting for several years now. And we're now urging citizens in Grenada to adopt rainwater harvesting. So for the last couple of months, thereabouts, the project hired a consultant to work with the project in the development of this legislation. The development of this legislation, we're also working along with the Planning and Development Authority, PDA, And this afternoon, we are joined by both the CEO of PDA, Mr. Alan Gilbert, and we are joined by the consultant, Mr. Saint-Hilaire. And both of them will come to you this afternoon to give you a short presentation on, first of all, why rainwater harvesting, what is the data, the scientific data showing us as it relates to rainwater harvesting, and then Mr. Sentile will take us through the legislation. Planning and Development Authority to take us through a little bit about rainwater harvesting and what the data is showing us as it relates to rainwater. Mr. Gilbert.
Good afternoon, everyone. And I assisted in drafting the regulations for rainwater harvesting. That's which we are looking at this afternoon. Not only so, but I also was instrumental in drafting an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding, between the GCRUS, the Ministry of Infrastructure, and the Planning and Development Authority that formalized the arrangements, the framework between which we will collaborate to see the rainwater harvesting regulations implemented. So I did that, and now I'm on the other side of the spectrum in PDA. And so today I stand here really representing the Planning and Development Authority. When GCRUS, the project is completed and they have left, it will be the responsibility of the Planning and Development Authority to operationalize and to manage the regulations. So I just gave some of that context while everything was being placed on the screen. So I just want to tell you now a little bit about rainwater harvesting, its benefits and so on, why is it important, and then I will turn over to my other colleagues. So I'm sure you understand the context of rainwater harvesting, what it's all about. It's simply collecting rainwater in a roof-like catchment, storing it instead of allowing it to run off, and directing it into a cistern, a reservoir, or some convenient holding tank so that it can be used for later use. There are four main components of a rainwater system. Let me see if I can just go to this. So there are four main components of a rainwater system. I mentioned them: the catchment area, the conveyance mechanism, storage, and your delivery system. I wouldn't stay long on these simple areas. These are just some images of typical systems, and I want to go straight to dealing with the water sector challenges in Grenada. Key question this afternoon is, are there challenges with the water sector in Grenada, Carriacou, and PT Martinique? And the answer is, of course, yes. This is the reason we are here. And what are those challenges? The challenge starts and ends with climate change. We have currently increasing temperatures, and you will see a chart there with an upward trend, the top chart showing for the last few years. It's kind of small, let me see. Trying to zoom into the year here. It looks like 1991. Since 1901, that data is showing the trend up to 2021, the top chart, and showing the temperature increase. And then the bottom chart shows rainfall decreasing. We have only from 2015 to 2020, just a 5-year period, but this is the key challenge. Along with that, that is causing a rise in sea level. So all of this is compounding the issues relating to water and the scarcity thereof. Additionally, we have other issues like aging infrastructure and economics, growing population, and also urban development, which are all posing a challenge. So what that has created for Grenada is a scenario I want to show you next. That was moved to the bottom. Okay, let me just jump to it. Sorry about that. I have to quickly go to that and come back up. There. Okay. Jeanine at the back, can I just ask you to put the slide back to the top? The one with demand and supply. I don't know. Yeah. It goes after. Yep. Not this. This is after the one with the current, Grenada's current and projected water situation, BAU. Not this one. All right. So while that is being found, I wanted to illustrate what the climate change has caused. It was really important that you see that this is what we intend to do by rainwater harvesting, but we want to show the chart that's prior to it. Delete it. All right, so currently the Grenada's demand for water is about 1.8 billion gallons of water per year, and we're only able to supply about 1.72 billion gallons. While that looks close, it's a difference of about 80 million gallons every year. So that's a significant amount of water difference. If you would see the chart, there it is. If you would see the chart, you'll notice that the two lines are widening and the gap is getting worse. And if we stay business as usual, we would have serious issues relating to water shortage or water scarcity in the future. So this is a chart there that is showing the difference, and you see the gap widening. And that's the situation that we face, and something needs to be done. And so the question now is, why rainwater harvesting? So we may say, if we're having less and less rainfall, then why it is we're using rainwater harvesting as a safety net or as a mechanism to go through that period. The reason is simply because we have enough rainfall during the year. And if you would look on the screen, let me take a mic and kind of step in front a little bit. So if you look on the screen, you notice that we currently get about 92 inches of rainfall every year. And that amounts to about 1.78 billion imperial gallons of water. We only need 1.8 billion gallons, I just mentioned that. That is only 1% of the amount of rain that falls on our island. We only use 1%. So we have a huge remainder here. In a bad situation, the rainfall drops to about 60 inches, and that equates to about 111 billion gallons of rainfall per year. With a demand that increases, or the same demand really, it means that we only will be using 1.6% of the annual rainfall. And we have done some projections to project a really dire situation according to the scientific data, going as low as 39 inches, way under half, 39 inches of rainfall per year. And if we increase our demand to about 2 billion, we only will be using 2.6% of the annual rainfall. So what that tells us, we have sufficient rain falling on our island, even if rainfall is getting less. That means that we just need to catch it and use it. And hence the reason rainwater harvesting is being promoted as a sustainable way for us to deal with our water needs. We don't need potable water for all of our needs. We noticed that that little graph there shows us that we need about 50% of our water needs does not need treating. But we could use it for toilets, for washing laundry and stuff, and washing your cars. Therefore, 50% of our demand, we could get that from rainwater harvesting. In Caracas, all the water comes from rainwater harvesting. This other chart will show us the potential for domestic. We could save as much as 50% in rainwater harvesting domestically and as much as 65% commercially, especially in hotels and restaurants, if rainwater harvesting is used. There is cost savings for using rainwater harvesting. Of course, the rainwater is free, and you will learn today that we are not, nor NAWASA is going to be charging you for rainwater or for collecting it. So you can collect it and use the water free of cost, except for your initial installation of your rainwater system. Here we just briefly showed some cost-benefit analysis to show that with a standard home, you can recover your initial investment within a few years. The last column there shows you within about 4 to 5 years, you can recover your initial investment on your rainwater system because you pay up front, but you will get savings later down. For a business or for a commercial who develop or designs a huge concrete and climate resilient system, it may take a little longer to recover the investment. So rainwater harvesting is also a climate change mitigation, preparedness and adaptation strategy, but there are some limitations. Limitations that we could work through. First of all, it requires some installation costs. Then it requires some technical skills, which most plumbers can handle. There's an issue if we get little to no rainfall. And of course, we showed the graph to indicate that the trends show that we will still have enough rain even though we haven't reduced rainfall. Storage capacity could be an issue. And of course, if it's getting less, you'll have to build larger storage, and then your investment cost increases a little bit. Improper installation and management can lead to increased mosquito population and other waterborne diseases, and the systems require some periodic maintenance, like everything else. And so we can mitigate against all of these limitations. And then this brings us to the recommendations, which were to make rainwater harvesting mandatory for new and existing buildings, and also make rainwater harvesting mandatory for all industrial, for the ICI sector we call it, industrial, commercial, and institutional buildings, facilities. So all government facilities, we intend to have everyone have a rainwater system similarly to Carriacou. So I will stop here at this time, and we're going to hear some more about the regulations itself, and later on I probably will tell you more about the technical aspects of the regulations and what it means for you and for us as a people. I will just put this on the table, I'm a civil structural engineer, also water engineer by profession, and so this has been developed and designed from both a scientific and a data-driven approach. So I will now invite Janelle. She's going to come again and take us to the next level. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gilbert, for that overview of Grenada's situation when it comes to rainfall data. I would now like to invite our consultant who has been working with the G-Cruise project for the past several months on the rainwater harvesting legislation. I would now invite Mr. Rommel Saint-Hilaire. He's a consultant from Barbados to come and introduce himself a little bit and then take us through the legislation. Mr. Saint-Hilaire.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking time out on your busy Friday afternoon to come to this very important consultation. As you could tell from my accent, I am from Barbados. I've been working on this project with G-Cruise and the PDA since last year. It's indeed a very important aspect for Grenada, and we are at a very advanced stage. So my job here is to just give you an idea of what are within the regulations. Just want to state up front, I'm not a policymaker, so I can't make any direct promises as to what will happen. But this is the legislative framework which is recommended for implementing this regulation. So a bit about myself. I'm the head of a firm called Lex Romulus International. We do policy development and the draft of legislation for Caribbean countries, such as Grenada. So within my firm, I also have a junior consultant, Shaquille Newton, who was very instrumental in the drafting of this legislation. So as part of my duties, I had to draft the rainwater legislation. We're also looking at regulations for the phasing out of inefficient water devices. So those devices that consume a lot of water, Grenada will be looking to phase them out. And naturally, to ensure that the Public Health Act is updated in terms of the obligations it has towards the water sector in terms of health. So those were the three items which I was tasked with doing. So coming out of that, we also drafted memorandum of understanding. So those suppliers would be able to provide, let's say, water tanks at special rates. The inefficient water devices would be produced with rebates, just as some examples. So we did templates for that agreement. In order to have legislation pass, most institutions need to take a cabinet memo with it. So it's basically an introductory document that goes to the cabinet as well. So that was also drafted for the rainwater harvesting regulations. So that is the single instrument we're going to be looking at this afternoon. So it is going to be within 5 parts. I'm not going to be too granular in the legal sense, but I'm going to provide a synopsis of what the regulations expect to do. There's the preliminary, which is more or less the beginning. The design and planning requirements, which indicate the type of designs which the rainwater harvesting device should have. There is the governance and institution, which shows you the framework which should be under, the responsibilities of the various government institutions. There will be the quality elements, including enforcement, and then there are the final provisions in terms of the operation of the regulation. So it is important to note that this regulation is for the regulation of the rainwater harvesting system. So naturally, we cannot say when rainwater is going to fall. What this is about, being able to capture that rainwater and convert it to positive use. So definitely you wouldn't be charged for not catching rainwater. You just have to be able to conserve it and use it wisely. So also important to the regulation, public safety. You have to ensure that the water is of a quality that could be used. You also have regulations which I will come to. You need to take particular measures if you want to use the rainwater for drinking purposes as opposed to non-potable or non-drinking purposes. So in terms of design planning, if you are designing a new building, you have to submit an application to the PDA as well that has to have an outline for a rainwater harvesting system. Your building has to be at least 250 square feet or 23 square meters. So if it's less than that, a rainwater harvesting system will not be needed. But anything from 250 square feet and up, for domestic, which is residential purposes, you would need to have a rainwater harvesting system. And depending on the size of your residence, that would determine the size of the rainwater harvesting system. Naturally, if you have a commercial enterprise or business, or as an institution, such as this school, they're going to have a higher requirement in terms of the rainwater harvesting system. Now, we come to the buildings that exist already. They will also be required to submit to PDA the rainwater harvesting system which they will be implementing. And they will have a period of 5 years in order to implement a rainwater harvesting system, also starting at 250 square feet. So this is expected to be mandatory for all citizens of Grenada who has a residence. So now you may ask, are there certain areas where persons may be exempt from doing this? And that answer is yes. So the PDA would be the body to determine what these exemptions would be. However, some of the guidelines would be, let's say, it's a vulnerable household. Let's say it's a matter of public safety. The area you have for the rainwater device is pretty close to someone's boundary and it could fall off onto their roof. That would be an issue of public safety. If you're able to more or less function with the pipe water to your residence, and this could be determined, that person may be able to have an exemption. They may also be looking at things such as age, financial circumstances, but each one will be looked upon at its own merit. So now we look at the composition of the rainwater harvesting system. So these are best practice recommendations, but essentially in summary, it's going to need a catchment area. This could be a roof or an open tank. It's going to need a conveyance mechanism once it's into that catchment mechanism. Then you're going to need the actual storage, which could be a cistern or water tank. And then you need the delivery mechanism. So let's say it's the pipes, or the pipes are aided by a pump as the delivery mechanism. So section 8 deals with the structure to facilitate the system. So these have to be designed by various personnel. Naturally, if it's a very small house and it's a one tank, if it's a certified plumber, for example, they will be able to indicate the type of rainwater harvesting device you have. The larger it gets, the more technical the person has to be. Here's a bit far. Okay, yes. So as you go forward, if it is like 10,000 gallons, for example, you're going to need an actual draftsperson. If it's even beyond that, you're going to need an actual engineer. In terms of the governance and the administration, the PDA is going to be the body for the government of this act. Coming under their act, these regulations will be formed because it's primarily a planning aspect. And they will be aided by the various government enterprises where necessary. So, for example, they could be aided by the Ministry of Health, NAWASA. We have some consultations with CARICO. So in their instance, if they have any concerns, they can liaise with the Ministry with responsibility for CARICO and Petite Martinique affairs and local government. But it is intended to be an integrated mechanism, so it's not just PDA alone. They're going to be working with other government agencies to make sure that this regulation works for the best for the citizens of Grenada. So naturally, you need to have enforcement mechanisms. So where persons may have a tank and it's suspected that it may not meet the relevant requirements or they're serving non-drinking water as drinking water, the PDA has powers within their act that they could use inspectors to check out residences, and this has been linked in this legislation. If they need extra assistance, let's say the person is not letting them into the residence, they release their dogs and everything, they could get the police force to come and assist them. They're also in charge of doing the various technical specifications, let's say their identification numbers. That's one aspect. Now we come to the rainwater quality requirements. So these are, of course, based on best practices. You need to have a first flush system in a diverter as well. And you need to ensure that we're dealing with water for non-potable or non-drinking purposes. However, these are still subscribed with a limit. So you can't use the non-drinking water, let's say, for bathing or brushing your teeth, because, of course, it still would be a health hazard. So there's certain elements which you can do based on the best practice mechanisms. Naturally, you have to have some sort of a filtration system to ensure that when it's captured, whether it's grill, mesh, or gratings, rainwater. This could be for the use in toilets, washing clothes. There's water in plants, for example, scrubbing and cleaning, but once it has the adequate treatment. For agricultural purposes, feeding of crops, feeding of animals, for example, cooling off of machinery, as some of the areas which it could be used for. In terms of commercial enterprises, again, use in toilets. They're used for laundering clothes, especially in the hotel industry, as this is a very big tourist jurisdiction. Scrubbing and cleaning, landscaping, which is dealing with the plants around a residence or a business, as well as mechanical cooling once the water has had the adequate treatment. So we now come to, sorry, I can barely see this, give me a second. Yeah, so as you can see there, you have the various mechanisms by which you can have the water, using the seal tank and cisterns, isolating that to ensure that you have the proper system to convey the adequate rainwater. The next slide will now deal with the agricultural aspect of it, which is slide 40, section 40. So, based on the agricultural needs, you could have a rainwater harvesting system for every 200 go, etc., and you want a feeding or drinking area for them, you could have a surface pond once, of course, you get the relevant approval from the authorities that be. So now we come to the rainwater for drinking, or the potable rainwater. So the place naturally has to be very clean, so it has to be completely clear from vehicular activity, as well as industrial fumes. So that is going to be a very important aspect of it, because you don't want to have contamination for something that is going to be consumed. And there are very specific recommended surfaces for the capture of this water. As you can see, I won't go through everyone, but there's like Portland cement surfaces, clear tiles as well, galvanized, PVC, plastic, but basically materials where you don't have to worry about toxicity. Then, of course, the filters, boiling, iodization, chlorinization, or the adding of chlorine to it. Filtration, you can use advanced techniques such as sand or stone, or basically anything which the PDA puts forward that will make that water adequate for drinking. What the regulations also do is give you an idea of what, for example, water running off the road that comes off of asphalt, that cannot be used. Anything not treated with asbestos covering, that also cannot be used. Things are discovered accordingly. Labeling. So this is not for system with either the word rainwater in green or the text not drinking water if it's not potable water, and it has to be separate and apart from the pipe water system so that it is known that this particularly is the rainwater system and it could be adequately and quickly identified, especially if it's an emergency circumstance. Fiscal incentives. So as I mentioned before, I'm not making any promises on behalf of any government. These are just guidelines. So if the government decides to do so, it's within the law, so it is possible. So if you're looking at doing this and it's coming into compliance for the first time, naturally some persons may not be able to afford it right away. So as incentives, the government could look at things such as tax rebates. If you're a business person and you're bringing in the tanks, perhaps some kind of tax mechanism, some sort of duty-free mechanism, which you believe is there for environmental purposes already. Components, for example, you may get a tax rebate for having such a system on your home. You may even get grants in order to have such a system. As I said, I'm not saying this is what's going to happen, but the law makes it possible for the minister to consult with the minister responsible for finance, and they could design a relevant incentive package. The possibility is there in the regulations. So now we come to the miscellaneous and final provisions. So more or less, this one speaks about ensuring that there is adequate maintenance, and it indicates that other entities such as NAWASA and the Ministry of Health can participate in measuring the rainwater to ensure that it's adequate for the use that it's being used for. So they'll work with PD in that regard, but they will be the actual scientists and technical experts testing the water itself, because the water testing is not PDA's mandate. I know the fun part everyone is interested in, the penalties for non-compliance. So we still have to decide what the actual penalties are going to be. There was discussions about it starting from as low as $1,000. In some instances, even going up to as high as $5,000 for individuals, $250,000 for enterprises. But of course, this has to be decided by cabinet at the end of the day. So other legislation was looked at in terms of the type of penalties. So, for example, you could look at $1,000 for an individual in breach up to maybe $20,000. And then for a corporation, maybe $5,000 initially, up to $250,000. And then perhaps for each ensuing day, there could be a continued fine. But I just want to say, because of the instructions given, this is an absolute last resort. What I'm instructed is that they'll be looking at compliance mainly. So if you're having trouble complying, the penalties are a last resort. They could provide an action plan for you. They could look to have technical assistance for you. They could even look to have administrative penalties. So let's say something relatively minor that you could mechanism instead. So this is only really a last resort for very hard-earned persons that would be like, government can't do me nothing. I'm not changing anything and not installing anything. giving people rainwater that's not proper, that's where the stiff penalties would come in. I think I go on the opposite way there. As I mentioned, companies, so this is to ensure that a company doesn't decide, well, this penalty is only $2,000, so I'll continue to give persons this rainwater is not treated because it's cheaper for me than to have to go buy a system with sand and stone and chlorine. So they have a much higher penalty to deter them from taking such action. Sorry, this up and down mechanism is a bit confusing. Okay, yeah. So the last elements of the legislation deal with the right to appeal. So the PDA has a tribunal. So if you are against any decision that Mr. Gilbert and his staff makes, you can invoke the PDA tribunal. If you don't like the tribunal's decision, you could take it a step further and go to the court itself. The PDA also has the power through the minister to make rules and guidelines. So they may be able to therefore give guidance on the further operational aspects of any part of the act. I've heard in consultations person asking in terms of fees, let's say you're making an application, what the fee is, that's going to fall squarely on PDA and not within this regulation. Because as you know, these things can change from time to time, and you don't want to have to keep going back in the regulation to change it. So that's where the rules and guidelines would come in. It's important to have maintenance, so there's a schedule that states how you should do your maintenance, whether you flush it out, whether you sweep the leaves away, and basically just as guidance mechanisms, and PDA can build upon that as well. I think we're coming to the final slide next, which speaks to conflict with other legislation. So this just makes sure that if some element is against the other laws, because this is a regulation or the Constitution, the other elements of the legislation will still continue to subsist, so it doesn't just completely fall apart. It's just a legal mechanism which we do to ensure the legislation remains operational. And that is it for the presentation. So now I turn back over to the MC. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sandhill. We now open the floor to any questions. We have a mic in the auditorium. Just indicate and somebody will bring the mic to you. So who's starting off? Ah, I see a hand. So can you just, oh, somebody's going to bring the mic to you.
How can one obtain a qualified person to install a water harvesting system? Because I've had the experience of getting a plumber spending a lot of money and he didn't know what the hell he was doing. I mean, no better way to put it. It doesn't work.
Yes, sir.
1, 2, 2. Thank you so much for your question. Yeah, there has been an issue with plumbers, but they are good plumbers. It's probably that you found a bad one. Like I said in my presentation, it requires some light technical skills. I do not consider myself to be a plumber, but I did all my plumbing. I did most of my plumbing of my rainwater system at home. I don't foresee that it requires such high level of skill that a trained plumber can't do the job. However, I just want to indicate that we've had a number of training sessions as part of the GCRUISE project. We led a training session up in St. Patrick with a number of persons, including a significant number of girls and women folk who learn to install, specifically to install rainwater harvesting systems. So we could probably provide a list. In due time, we will make a list available, and my good friend Janelle will be able to indicate where you can find that list of professionals who have been trained through that course or any other course that we've had where plumbers have been trained specifically to install rainwater systems.
All right, so one other
I can
thing,
just
list,
before you continue,
okay.
I can add on to what Mr. Gilbert just said, because earlier this year, around January, the G-Cruise project, together with the National Training Agency, we held a plumbing session for both private and public sector stakeholders, and they are working on, or they went through climate resilient plumbing practices, the courses that are taught both at the TAMCC and also NULO. So we are trying to enhance the CVQ and NVQ qualifications so that persons who go to these two tertiary institutions and they do plumbing, they are much more aware of how to do climate resilient plumbing. So we're enhancing the skills of TAMCC and NULO students. So in the future, the near future, I hope, we should have some more efficient plumbers on island.
Well, yeah, but how would the general public obtain such a list of qualified plumbers?
Well, we will have to work along with the NTA in that, so to make persons' information available to the general public, you know. So it's a, thank you for that thought, and it's something that we will have to work on.
All right, one other thing before I pass on the mic. I have some barrels, the blue barrels you get from overseas, and I want to know if the water stored in them, if it's safe for plant use.
Safe for planting?
Plant use, to use
Oh, plant
in
use.
agriculture.
Rainwater?
Yeah,
Yes, it is safe.
because some plastic do emit BPA and other things, so you say it is safe. You're sure of that? Okay.
Well, I'm not the technical person here, but I guess
Well,
Mr. Gilbert can.
person, is it safe? And last question, how regular should that black tank be washed?
Yeah.
And how do you find someone to clean that black tank?
Yeah, so absolutely. To your first question, rainwater harvesting is absolutely safe for agriculture. Very good, especially for agriculture, for washing vehicles, for laundry as well. And you can treat it and use it for drinking as well. However, in Carriacou, they barely treat rainwater and they consume it. And science has proven that the gut really requires some of the microbes in the air and so on to consume for proper gut health. And we normally will kill and purify, and so we have a different system, a different digestive system. If we go to Carriacou and we drink their water, we probably will get ill. But they consume it all the time, and they're totally fine. So we're not encouraging it for Grenada here as part of the regulations. We're saying if Grenadans have to use it, because we have already been programmed and set up in such a fashion that we treat our water, we were recommending treated water. So I just added that in. In terms of the black tanks, the regulation also speaks to maintenance of all of the system. We could provide that for you, but I believe it is recommended that the tanks be cleaned once every year. And you need a plumber again to...
Well, I don't know who. I only learned recently, and I've had the tank for a few years, that it have to be cleaned periodically. Even the plumber who installed it, he didn't know. And when I said to him, because I did attend one of the G-Cruise session, and I said to him, I just learned that it have to be cleaned. And he said, oh, I didn't tell you that. I said, well, how do I get somebody to clean it? He doesn't know, and I can't find anyone who knows or can clean it, because when he looked at it a few weeks ago, he said, then all the water have to be just emptied out. I said, well, you can't just waste all this water, and there was no return valve or something like that.
Yeah. So what I would advise, if there's a good filtration system on the rainwater, especially from the guttering, my colleague, Mr. Saint-Hilaire, mentioned that we should have what is called a first flush system or a first flush diverter. That allows for the first rains that fall on the roof. It runs into a chamber, into a small pipe, and it slowly fills up, and then a ball shuts off that first water, and that seeps out. Yeah. And so that first rain does not go into the tank. If you have that, along with other filtration, proper grills and gratings and mesh, you can prevent a lot of the organics from getting into the tank, like small leaves and so on. And that means that your tank will build up sediments at a much slower rate than if you did not have the filtration systems. I'm saying that to say with the filtration systems, you can probably have a tank that will, without cleaning it, could last much longer than 1 year. It is just recommended that it's clean it's clean every year to allow for maximum efficiency. But some people have these tanks for sometimes 5 years and it's not clean. But you will have the small sediments building up from the organics, building up at the bottom of the tank. And it would not disturb, especially the water falls on the top and it doesn't cause what we call scurrying or the movement of water at the bottom. So the water comes out to the tap, especially because the tap or the effluent, which is the water going out from the tank, is set at about 1.5 inches, sometimes 1 inch on the bottom, so it allows for the tank to build up some sediment before it requires cleaning. I hope that helps.
Well, yeah, but that's partial answer. What I also ask is, how does someone obtain or know where to get someone who is skilled enough to clean the tank?
You might have to tell me where you live. How come I help you with that? But
okay.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Like Janelle mentioned, she'll provide the list, and we will try our best to make it accessible on GCRU's various platforms so that it can be publicized. You probably just try to find a good plumber. It's as a union. I am aware of a union. You just unscrew a union top and bottom and you dismount the tank and empty it. I'm probably saying that because I feel I'm okay, but
that's a lot of water to waste.
Oh, the wasting. So what should happen is you could do one or two things. You can shut off a valve. If you don't have a valve, disconnect the inflow to the tank and use up the water before you clean the tank. That is what should be advised. And so that's how I clean mine as well. I have both an open tank and a closed tank. And I will just shut with the open tank, with the open tank, I can shut water off. Rain falls directly into it. But what I will do in the hardest part of the dry season, when it gets really, really, really low, that's when I drain the last bit of it out, clean the tank, and then I put it back in service. For the closed tank, you can just remove the pipe that goes in, and you keep using down the water, and when it is dry, you knock the tank, you hear it's dry, and then you clean the tank, you put the tank back in operations, and you reconnect the influence pipe or the water supply line. I hope that helps.
We hope we were able to answer you. Any other questions? Am I to take it? Okay. Brittany.
I'm sorry to say, but I wasn't actually satisfied with your answer to that lady, because I can understand what you're saying, but I can't take that home with me, remember it, and implement it. I would need some kind of guide, like on your website, that says, you need a 2-tank system. I need some kind of information base, not just the conversation. And I also need to be confident with whatever plumber I am using. And like this lady here, I have had some bad experiences with plumbers, and it's cost me a lot of money. And with all due respect, I don't have a lot of faith in some of the training programs here. I've used electricians, I've used plumbers, they're supposed to be qualified, and I've lost faith. Yeah? So your answer doesn't really satisfy me. Yeah, yes. It doesn't make me feel confident. And I'm someone who desperately wants a tank. So I think you say, oh, shut it off. And I think, well, if you shut it off, or you close it, where does the water go if it rains? Do I then have to have a separate feed so that when I'm wanting to clean the tank and I shut it off, I think, okay, you divert the water? I just don't know, you know?
Yeah.
You've offered me other questions rather than solving that particular question. I don't want to be negative or anything, because I just think this is a new area opening up, and there's a skills lag, yeah? And I know there is very much a skills lag, yeah?
Thank you so much. I mean, I should say that I understand all of your concerns with regards to expertise and skills in those areas, and it's valid. And what I would say is, again, the regulations speaks to maintenance of the system, what has to be maintained and at what period, so you could use that for that aspect. You can also, for persons who feel like they have the skill sets, or maybe as a reasonable handy person, they can go online and they can check, they'll see how to disconnect a union and so on. And finally, we again will make the list. Even though you might not trust, that's the best that we can offer, is to make the list of persons who are trained, and maybe speak around to some and find who is the best plumber available to be able to unmount and reinstall your systems after cleaning for you. That's the best that we can offer at this time.
And I can just add that we already created some pamphlets. We created a pamphlet on how to set up a rainwater harvesting system and how to maintain a rainwater harvesting system. And those two pamphlets can be found online at the climateresilience.gov.gd website. I believe we do have one of those pamphlets currently on the little table in the back there. So you can take it, and it has the website on it. But that website, climateresilience.gov.gd. And thank you for that suggestion on cleaning. Maybe we'll have to think about creating a little pamphlet on that as well.
Great. One last question. Okay, so I've got my system and all that. I'm now worried about grey water harvesting. Is there anything in the pipeline for the officers' skills, opportunities and ideas about how to do grey water harvesting?
You said grey water harvesting. Yes, we have no such at the moment. I've heard of many attempts to utilize grey water, treat it in communal systems. So far, there's none. Most persons are not satisfied in. There's even black water treatment, and we're talking about sewage, if you understand. The grey water comes from your sink and your face basin, and that water in some cases runs into the drain. The black water comes from the effluent of your septic tank before it goes into. It normally goes into your soakaway system or your tile field or your leach field. And that even is treated in many parts of the world. It is treated and it is brought back to drinking quality. Some people wouldn't want to hear a thing about that. They wouldn't trust, but that is something that could be considered. This project has not considered grey water, but it's something to look at, and many countries is being done, especially grey water, and used for agricultural purposes, used for and so on. So it's a good thought. Thanks for that.
All right. Thank you.
Any? Okay.
Okay, good night, everybody. I have a couple questions here. Mr. St. Hilaire mentioned something that I'd just like to get clarity on. Did you say something about 5 years for every house in Grenada to implement this system? Is that what you said?
If it's a house that already exists, already established, there's a 5-year period to come into compliance. If it's a new house, drawing the plans, you're expected to have a rainwater harvesting system outlined within that plan ready to submit it to PDA prior to approval. So it's a two-tier process. It looks at new buildings, and it looks at the buildings which are existing already. Once you exist already, you have a compliance period of 5 years. The actual implementation of such is that you would send the current plan to PDA, or is it that you would just go and see what system they're putting in? Yeah, you'll send the plan to PDA, and they will approve whether it's adequate to have that type of rainwater system there, depending on the size of your residence or your business.
Is that already in effect? Is that a law in effect?
No, it hasn't been passed as yet. It has to go before cabinet and then parliament.
All right, thank you. The other thing I wanted to ask is about if you have a system for harvesting rainwater, but it does not meet the standards that you have outlined, there's no first flush and what have you. So you mentioned that plumbers and people were trained. Have they been trained like to retrofit whatever may be existing and to bring it up to standard? Would we be able to rely on whoever is trained to do that?
Yeah, that is the intention. So in order to have the plan pass, more or less when PDA comes and they do the inspection, they will be able to advise you of what exactly is deficient, if that's the case.
Yeah.
And then you and the relevant plumber or, let's say, engineer person installing would be able to rectify that. So they are more or less the body that's doing the compliance mechanism.
Okay. And
just before you go further with your additional question, let me clarify that the regulation allows for innovation in terms of your rainwater system. You do not necessarily have to have a first flush, like water first flush system. Okay. If you have a good mesh that you can create, or you can create your own, maybe you put a barrel with a mesh on top of it, water goes into that one and flows out of that one into another, and that is your filtration system. And every now and then you clean that first barrel, that works. So there's no mandatory aspect. And the systems could be as simple as using those barrel blue shipping barrels. If you have for a 250 square foot home, which is about 16 by 16 roughly, if you have a home that size, you only need 4 of those barrels to meet the minimum storage requirement. So you set 4 of those barrels up and connect them to each other, and you bring it buttering down into one. Obviously, the sediments will stay in the first, the water, cleaner water flows over to the last, and you keep using from the last, and there you have a rainwater system that is sufficient. Okay. The key to that is that we want those systems to be resilient. We want to have them after a hurricane, but what you can do is, if a hurricane is coming, you can unmount or dismount the system, pack it away, and reinstall it after the hurricane, when you have a simple system. So maybe you can even do that for the black tank. Some people will make sure the tanks are fully filled during an event like that, so that they can stay on whatever surface or whatever be. So I just mentioned all of this to say it's not that we have some specific requirement for the tank, you must have a concrete or you must have a black tank. Once you have the minimum storage, you have all of the components there so that it constitutes a real rainwater system, you should be fine.
Okay, thank you. And I just thought it was interesting. This is a little aside. Mr. Gabriel mentioned in Karakou, the people don't treat their water and they drink it and they're fine. But here in Grenada, we treat our water. So in Petit Martinique, it's reversed. The Nawassa water that people in Petit Martinique use, they don't drink that. That's not, by their standards, that's not quality drinking water, so that's what they flush toilets and so on with. And they drink the water that they collect in their cisterns. So I just thought that was interesting. Okay.
Let me just add some comments to that. Yes, of course, in our consultation recently up there, we were told that our site is producing water from desalination. Okay. And to them, that does not taste as anything to drink, so they use that for their other needs and they drink their rainwater. Yeah. They would use some small fishes called millions that they place in the tank, and the millions will eat any larvae, mosquito larvae, and eat any microbes in the water. And some people ask, where does the fish defecate? And right in the water, and they use that, but that's also fine. So some people might think that's strange, because But it works for them. It has been working many places. So that was why we're not changing the traditional way of rainwater harvesting in Caribou. So there are some parts of the regulation that is different for Caribou and compared to what is there for Grenada, in terms of both quality and size of storage. On the other hand, Caribou's requirements, minimum storage requirement is 10 times that amount of Grenada. Obviously, there's a reason for that. They get half the amount of rainfall, one, and they don't have surface water that they can use to create potable water. Thank you.
All right, I see we have one more question in the back.
Good evening. You mentioned, Mr. Saint-Hilaire, you did mention in terms of the amount of storage that one has in constructing the storage area. You have to employ an engineer or something like that, depending on the quantity of storage. If in a case where someone have already built a storage without the use of an engineer, how does that work?
Yeah, so if you have an existing plan already, not a plan, sorry, if you have an existing system already, you more or less just have to submit what you have to PDA. And once it's in compliance, you'll be okay. Because remember, this is really before, you're going to have a grace period before. So if you have this system and everything is on all fours, yeah, they're okay with it. But I'll let PD address that particular aspect.
Let me just clarify. You will be okay if you have an existing system. You will be okay, like he said. The only thing we will not require you to submit on existing system, except you want to increase or add a new system. A new system, they must come to the planning for approval. Now, if you have an existing building with no system, and you are adding a system, whether it's concrete or you have a concrete structure to take HDP tank, that's a high density polyethylene or the black tanks, then you have to submit an application for the structure that will take the tank. Not a building, just for the structure or for your new rainwater system. But for existing systems, you're fine. You don't have to submit any plans for your system that already exists. Is that clear?
Yeah, thank you.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm a young engineer just branching into designing of rainwater system for agricultural purposes. So my question, thanks. My question to you is the training you mentioned before about with the plumbers. How can we be up to date for when the next one is? Because that's something I'm interested in attending.
Well, we collaborated with the National Training Agency. So from after that session, they will now go to their respective agencies or bodies, the CARICOM agency for the CVQ, the Caribbean Vocational Qualification, and then the regional body, the local body, sorry, will have to deal with the NVQ. So thereafter, it will be left on the NTA to more or less stake this and execute it, both the NTA and TAMCC and NULO.
So if I want to do it,
then you may have to check either NTA or TAMCC and NULO.
Okay, thanks.
See the lady in orange to my right.
Okay, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Yes, so in the years gone by, when my home was constructed, we built a cistern, a tank, that solely took in rainwater, maybe just over 125 cubic meters thereabout. Now, recently we discovered, well, Ivan would have knocked away the pumping system. And because water became so reliable in that area, nothing was really done to pump water and so forth. But recently we discovered that groundsmen would have damaged the pipes because the pipes were running somewhat underground from the roof underground. So now the tank has a lot of mud in it. And as the most senior able person at home right now, my challenge is to get someone, well, there's still water in it, but there's a lot of mud in there as well. What help is there? Where can I get someone who can probably get down into the tank? Because there's a big, what they call it, area to go in. But to get someone who can get into there to clean out the tank. I also discovered there is a leak because around it now is always wet, which means there is some leakage. Can that be restored? Is there some avenue for getting it restored? Because it served well when it existed and when farming was a thing. We're not doing farming right now. So that's a query I have. And then for the regular cleaning, I was happy to hear that a blue drum can become the point of filtration eventually. And can I take it that once that blue drum is set up with the stones, etc., then cleaning off a big thing like that would not really become necessary if you have that filtration system before the water goes into the tank?
All right, let me take a shot. Thank you so much for your questions. First of all, we may have to get back to the days of maroons and getting community help and so on for your tanks. Those questions relating to who does what and where we can find help are the hardest set of questions because finding credible persons and finding people to help is often very difficult. But again, we just have to refer you to either the list that is going to be provided, or I could simply say you have to try back to the old days and try the maroon and see if you get some persons to help and cook a pot of oil down on the side, and we'll make a team and come and see if we could come help clean the tank. So that one is off the record, right? But in terms of the crack in the tank or whether if it's leaking, yes, concrete tanks can be repaired. There are a number of new technology now for repairing tanks. Both Crichton, that's a brand name, and Nexseal have products that they are hydrophilic cementitious compounds. So let me break that down a little bit. Hydrophilic means that they are crystalline, is a crystal-like compound that looks like cement. That's what I mean by cementitious. And when it gets in contact with water, it grows crystals. And the crystals bind and continue to grow as long as it gets in contact with water. So it's best, first of all, to build your water tank and your concrete water tanks with that, because it's self-healing. And I'll just give you a little quick story. I remodeled my home and put a water tank above my bedroom. So I sleep underwater. And people told me initially I'm crazy because concrete was cracked one and it will leak. And it's almost 6 years now, never had a leak. I'm seeing cracks in the beams, but no water is getting to the beams, so it's not healing. But the slab, I designed the slab properly to ensure that we have the right reinforcement to prevent against bending and deflection. We have slope and deflection for my friend who's an engineer here. So you don't want to put too much what we call hydrostatic pressure or high level of water, right? So that you're increasing your chances of bending or causing deflection in the slab. So you want to spread the water over wide areas, meaning just use about 2 feet max of water and spread the area wide as possible. That is one. I use that concrete, that waterproof admixture in the concrete, and so that if a crack develops, it continues to heal for the lifetime of that concrete tank. And that's why I could trust, and it's been good so far. I have it also on my other decks, In my time at NAWASA, I also did 6 years at NAWASA, and I introduced that there, and NAWASA has been using those hydrophilic admixtures since, and they're working very, very, very extremely well. And actually, when we commissioned a few of the tanks, we saw small leaks, and within a few days, the leaks just dried up. The tanks are perfect, and it will continue to self-heal for the duration of the tank. So now, there are other crack repair from these same companies, crack repair kits that you can open the crack, chip them, open it, and apply a paste of like a mortar, and it will heal the crack. Yeah, once it doesn't continue to open, it's not a serious structural failure in the tank, you can use the repair kit and it should be fine. So it's a matter of having someone look at it and determine whether or not it is repairable. But most likely, if it's a small leak, it is repairable. And the barrel filter for the bigger tanks? No. So that was it. Yes, for your last question. So let me say this. Now, even NAWASA has used what is called slow slant filtration, and they also do rapid filtration in closed systems. And they have what is called a flux rate. That is the time in which it takes for the water a certain amount of water to filter through. It goes through it goes to what is called a clear well or a clear water tank, and then it is treated and then sent through your pipes into our homes. If you fill a clean barrel of that filtered water and you leave it to settle, at the bottom you will still see a film of a little bit of fine, very, very, very fine, if you want to say dust, put it that way. It's smaller than dust, but you'll still see that. So I'm simply saying, in your own little system that you will develop, it will slow down the rate at which you will require your larger storage tank to be cleaned, but you will still need to clean it over some period of time. So I'll say it is best to put some pre-filtration, right, to filter out the heavy organics and so on from getting into your main storage tank. That helps. And you can even design a good enough treatment system where you use activity carbon like charcoal and sand and so on, what we call the media. But I encourage you to have a water engineer like our good friend here and anybody else who are trained in water filtration, because they can do the proper calculations to make sure that the water is flowing at a certain rate and is treated at that rate so that you have very little microbes or very little organics passing through the filter media. I hope that helps answer your question.
Yes, I see we have another question in the audience. You can go ahead.
Okay. At the moment, I don't think you answered how as to whether the stuff you're talking about to put in the tank is available locally to repair the concrete.
To repair? Oh yes, you can find. I try not to advertise. I didn't want to use the brand names, but it's only 2 brands. Zypex, so let me call all of them. Zypex also has a repair system, and you can search for whatever hydrophilic crystalline. You want it to be crystalline in nature. That means it's a growing crystal type, right? So you can look for that. As far as I know, some of the hardwares have it. Better you search the hardwares. Okay. Hardware stores to find out, but I know it's available in Grenada. I don't want to say the names of where I know it's available in Grenada, unless I become an agent.
So can have that chat after.
So with the rainwater harvesting, because right now I'm in the process. I had to submit today to get a system, and I've been interested in the first flush system. I've asked many plumbers. Nobody knows what I'm talking about. I'm showing them YouTube videos. I'm asking the hardwares, and nobody knows what I'm talking about. And is there anything you could use locally to do it? Like, how simple is the system?
So the first flush diverter system can be made locally by buying portions of pipe and creating it. So you can look at the same videos and kind of make it. What we wanted to do, it came up in our discussion, is have a few trained persons go into some kind of a business model to make them and make them available for sale. So engineer, when you do your course, you can think about that, and we're encouraging other plumbers who may be listening and who can do it to maybe reach out to DCRUZ and say that we can build it, and so that we can publish the names of persons who are able to make it. But the materials to make it are available here. You can get one of the simple balls that are used in either the toilet bowls or for tanks, and you could put them into a simple pipe. Use an end cap. I don't want to give you, it will take some time to explain how it's made here, but it's makeable right in Grenada. That's something we should consider, where we have a little session just on making these first flush diverters. But like I said, you can do other things to get even better filtration, because you are losing some of the water that goes through the first flush system. So there are even other things that you can do. There's what is called it's not a weed eater, leaf eater, that is being manufactured in Trinidad. I have one on a tank. The water falls on a grill, and an angle grill, and the leaves fall on the grill and slide out, and the water passes through. So that takes care of the leaves, and but the spaces are maybe about 2 millimeters, so that would allow for a lot of small pebbles and stones still to get through. But like I said, you can then go below that if you want to, or you can just buy a simple small fine mesh and rest on top of that and allow for, but you will have, the smaller the mesh, that means you will have to check that mesh more frequently, else it will go into the tank. So again, it's a matter of being innovative and you doing whatever you can to just make sure that you don't have too much dust or organics getting into your final storage. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any more questions from the floor?
Good afternoon. Excuse. What do you think about overflow? Just the water comes into the tank, and because it's filled, it just flows out for itself. Is that a kind of flush?
Let me answer this. Let me start first by saying every system should have an overflow, or must have an overflow, or else the water, if you have more rain than capacity of your tank, it will overflow and just fall around. And maybe if your system is close to your building, that overflowing water can affect the foundation of your building, and you don't want that. So you want to connect, first of all, your overflow, which is normally at the top of the tank, a few inches from the top of the tank, and that distance from the top of that overflow to the top of the tank, we call it a freeboard, right? So you want to make sure you have the freeboard, and your overflow goes into a drain, right? And like we said, it's a flood mechanism, so you store most of the rainwater that falls, then you avoid flooding somewhere else. Now, you ask if it is like a flushing mechanism. That's why I said you can set up a smaller barrel, right, and have just the water flowing into one end, and it's flowing out, it's overflowing, and a pipe slightly higher than slightly lower than the inflow, and that overflow, the rubble and small stones and sand will stay at the bottom because it will settle, and the water will overflow, and you can have it overflowing into another tank. So that is also a good idea that you can use, and every now and then, because it's a small barrel, you disconnect that little barrel, clean that little barrel, and you put that barrel or a small bucket. But the larger it is, the better. The larger it is, it will be better, because a small bucket, when it falls, if it scores at the bottom, it will keep sending turning up the dust, as it were, and the dust gets to go over. So what you want is that the water falls at the top and it doesn't disturb the bottom, right? But because the stuff is falling to the bottom and it overflows into your other tank. So that's a good idea, though, by the way.
Could I offer my house for a model for doing whatever you want?
Of course, that would be lovely. We'll talk about how we can maybe publish that as and publish probably the examples we have in Grenada, that may be a very good idea to publish the various, for instance, my own roof water tank that I did a paper on and presented at the Caribbean Water and Wastewater Association, and it has since been requested from a reputable journal in the United States to be published. So we want to publish things like that so that we can see those examples and persons can utilize the similar technologies. Even though they are similar, simple technologies, they can be utilized. Thank you so much for that opportunity, Miss.
Thank you. Do we have any final questions? All right, take it everyone understands the legislation. Okay, one more question. Mike is coming.
Will you keep us informed as, you know, when you have other programs going on?
Yes, so we took your contact details earlier on, so we will be in touch with you as the process goes on and keep you informed on any articles, pamphlets, anything we have created, as well as you can also visit our social media page or the Climate Resilience website, because we normally upload several documents. They're related to the project as well as rainwater harvesting.
Thank you.
Okay. So with there being no further questions, I will just give our two speakers 1 minute to leave a parting word with our audience, both at the auditorium here and online.
As I have my mic in my hand, I will go first, and then I'll allow my colleague, Mr. Sentil, to go after. We've had a number of consultations, and out of it, we've noted a few frequently asked questions, and I want to use them, two of them at least, as a springboard into my final statements. I hope it takes 1 minute. I'll try my best. But one of them is relating to how much does it cost? That is a broad question, because it can cost you just asking some persons for barrels or buying a tank. If you need a 1,000-gallon tank, it costs in the region of about $2,500 for 1,000, and even less for if you need a 600 or 450 or 400-gallon tank. So I don't want to give the numbers, but this question of are there subsidies, are there help, government help, and where would we find the money to invest? And I want to encourage persons that this regulation is not something that the government is doing to find a way to just give you a regulation or make something that is onerous or difficult for you to do. This is done on the backdrop of climate change that is going to affect us sometime or the other, or as a matter of fact, that is already affecting us. My 2 rainwater tanks are primarily responsible for me currently making it through this period, because we are already in the dry period, and I'm already getting water maybe once or twice per week. And the rainwater tanks that I have is helping me. One of the advantages of the roof tank is that I need no energy or pumping mechanism. It flows directly to my 3 toilets on my 3 levels, and I have water almost all of the time, except in a very harsh dry seasons, when sometimes I have a valve that I can open when now I send a little bit and full that rainwater tank. So that's an idea that you can use. So I'm just encouraging persons. This is not something that is being done just because somebody's looking for an avenue to either charge you or give you something difficult to do, but something for what is called our sustainability. For us being able to survive now and for our future generations to survive. And if it becomes a regular practice, like it is done in Carriacou, we will see that we have a means of surviving even when the challenges get greater. So I encourage you to become compliant. If you currently are designing your home, put in your rainwater system design now, even without the regulations being there. And if you have an existing home, start to think about where you can find financing. There are other means of low-cost financing through some of the banks. Maybe Janine will want to, in her final comments, tell us about that. So I encourage you to see this as something that is a benefit for yourself, and do whatever you would take to invest into it. It is for your and my own good and sustenance. Thank you so very much for coming here today and for listening so attentively. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gilbert. Mr. Sentile?
Yes, just to reiterate what Mr. Gilbert said in terms of regulation, we hear this and we think, oh, what are they looking to do to us now? This is a very innovative and important aspect, but naturally things need to be regulated so you have guidance, so you know what to expect and where to go. This is why consultations like this are important, so we could get your feedback and the law could be done in such a way that is equitable to everyone and it could be applied in a way that you will feel more comfortable. As I mentioned, there are some areas for fiscal incentives involved. It is meant to be a complex exercise more than punitive or punishment. And as you know, the world is changing. Grenada is scheduled to have less and less rainfall. And I hear about the water issues you have, quite similar to what we have home in Barbados. And this project is indeed a very good and innovative way to ensure that you have this resource, also as a tourist island, to have those industries also having that, so that, of course, when you get good reviews, there's at least always water. I mean, it's really not good for a hotel to go there and for persons to be saying this institution had no water for whatever reason. So this regulation ensures that it is there, and it then also helps to preserve the reputation of the country itself. For my friend here who's an engineer, it provides an avenue of employment for such persons as well to further hone their skills and perhaps have a niche in a very particular area. So it's a good opportunity, it's a good regulation, and I can see it working in this country more or less. So my advice, embrace it, continue to tweak it if it needs to be tweaked, and see how best it can work for citizens of Grenada. Thank you very much.
So thank you to Mr. Alan Gilbert, CEO of PDA, and Mr. Sentile from, we have one last question on the floor. Almost missed her there. I guess something our two colleagues just said, gave her a little hint of something. Let's hear.
It is not a question. Good evening, everyone. But I'm a contractor. So if you are interested in getting services to fix your tank or to install your tank, I'm available. You can just pass on me after. I can give you my cell phone number, and we can get in contact.
Okay, so it was a moment there for her to make a plug. All right, so I want to thank Mr. Sentile and Mr. Gilbert for coming out this afternoon, and also to you, our citizens who attended in person, as well as those online via the GIS, TNR Communications, and GIS platform. We hope we have provided some clarity on the rainwater harvesting legislation, and we want to wish you safe travels as you go home. As Mr. Sentile said in his closing remarks, let us embrace rainwater harvesting. So good evening, everyone, and pleasant night. Thank you very much.
Thank you.